Have you ever heard the name Agnes Boyajou? Well, my name is Kaitlin Moose, and this is 50 Shades of Great. Okay, so maybe you haven't heard of Agnes, but you've probably heard of Mother Teresa. When she became a nun, she chose this name from Saint Therese of Lisieux. And Mother Teresa is best known for dedicating her life to helping the poorest of the poor in the slums of Calcutta, India. It was there she began her own order called the Missionaries of Charity, and in 1979 she was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for her work.
They don't need our pity and sympathy. They need our understanding love. They need our respect. They need that we treat them with dignity.
I personally was very interested in learning more about Mother Teresa, as I was very, very fortunate to travel to India myself 2 years ago for a friend's wedding, and it was actually in Calcutta, so I felt while I was in that really historic city I wanted to visit the Mother House. And I was so lucky to attend a service there and meet some of the nuns working there and see Mother Teresa's room and where she prayed, and also her tomb, which is right there among the people that she helped for decades. I actually got a prayer bracelet from the Missionaries of Charity, and it has Mother Teresa on it and pray for us. And I just really wanted to learn more about this person who exemplified such selflessness and willing to really find people on an individual level and help them, especially after witnessing firsthand some of the poverty in India that's quite frankly overwhelming. And for her to have persevered when people said, you know, she's not even making a difference, when in fact she ended up having this global impact. Part of my research came from these two books, if you'd like to check them out for yourself. Beyond the Image is a biography, and Come Be My Light is more of her private writings. So she was born on August 26th, 1910 to a Catholic Albanian family, even though Albania didn't become an independent state for 2 more years, and she grew up around a lot of war and violence with the Serbians. So from the aftermath of that, her mother would take in and feed the poor, and Mother Teresa actually says in later years she thought as a young girl that these were relatives that her mother was feeding, and it wasn't until later she realized that these were strangers that her mother was allowing into their home, and I think that served as kind of an example of the work that Mother Teresa would do in later years. She realized at a very young age that she wanted to devote the rest of her life to God. She was 12 when she realized that, and so at age 17 she made the decision final. She wanted to be a missionary to India, and so she joined the Loreto Sisters at age 18. And after a long boat ride over to India, her first accounts of seeing India were of, quote, the indescribable poverty. She says, if our people could only see all this, they would stop grumbling about their own misfortunes and offer up thanks to God for blessing them with such abundance. For the next 2 years, she studied in Darjeeling and learned Hindi, Bengali, and improved her English. And in 1931, Agnes took her first vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience as a sister of Loreto and became Sister Teresa. She went to Calcutta and taught at the Loreto schools there, which were renowned for their great education in English. Therefore, many of the girls who came there were from wealthy families. And she did that for many years until becoming head mistress. Because of the rules as a Loreto sister, she remained enclosed and hidden to the outside world. So she was literally shielded from the poverty and violence that was happening in Calcutta. It was only on a few rare instances that she was able to witness firsthand what was happening and the begging and dying in the streets. Especially in 1943, there was a huge famine that hit. People were just starving in the streets, abandoning their families, and there was an influx of people who had come from the surrounding areas due to war, fighting for independence from Britain. There was violence between Muslims and Hindus, and there was an extreme maldistribution of food to accommodate everyone. And it was on a train to her annual retreat in Darjeeling that Mother Teresa heard this call within a call, she describes. She said she actually heard God's voice and that he said she must leave the convent and help the poor by living among them. So she was given a year to prove herself. She went out into the slums and taught children there. She walked around and tried to identify as many places and people as possible that she could help with cleaning, anything. And pretty soon some of the girls that she had taught came to help and volunteer with her. And everything was very ground level. It was a very grassroots method of charity. Those joining Mother Teresa took the same vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, along with a fourth vow to give wholehearted and free service to the poorest of the poor. Previously, missionaries had been all about trying to Christianize the nation that they were working in. How many baptisms did you get this week? How many converts did you get? Now Mother Teresa was leading by example and there to help and support all people as she encountered. On October 7th, 1950, the Pope approved the Order of the Missionaries of Charity, and just 4 years later, made her congregation a society of pontifical right. She opened a house for the dying destitute, a children's home, a house for the lepers. She and the Missionaries of Charity were focused on small acts of kindness and believed that these were the things that would show God's love. Caring for the poorest of the poor, literally touching those whom Indian society had deemed untouchable. Her movement grew and she opened homes around the world. She spoke at different events. She's actually described as a walking contradiction, which, I mean, all of us are, but she's this very small, physically, nun who's showing kindness to everybody and really humbling herself to work with the poorest of the poor, and yet has the confidence and charisma to interact with and even befriend some of the world's leaders and celebrities, and used the media to attract attention and publicity and awareness, as well as raise funds for the work that she was doing. So she gained a lot of attention, she won a lot of awards, and she said that she always wanted to, she didn't want to accept that personally. This was God's work that she was doing. She always wanted to redirect that attention back to God. She said herself that she was just a pencil in God's hand. And with all that attention came a lot of criticisms. People thought that the donations maybe weren't being allocated properly or efficiently. There were questions about the conditions of her homes and why weren't medicines being used to cure people that could have been helped rather than simply cared for at the end of their lives. Plus, she had very strong opinions and spoke very openly opposing abortion. But she was very firm in her beliefs. She wanted to keep it simple. This is what they were doing. They weren't providing medical services. They weren't social workers. They were a religious order that was providing spirituality and cheerful giving to these people and caring for the unwanted and the unloved. It was this very simple act of loving your neighbor. And more than that, I think there was this ripple of kindness, this ripple effect where she was attracting a lot of volunteers, and they would go back and provide the same kind of experience in their own communities. So I think the real legacy of Mother Teresa is this attitude of kindness and acceptance of all people. We're not better than anyone else. If she was willing to give up everything and suffer alongside the poorest of the poor, then that makes us in turn think, well, what can we do to help as well? She made a very big point that you don't have to, a lot of people get overwhelmed by the task of helping, and you don't have to make this big grand gesture. It can just be in the very smallest act, and that way that kind of starts this chain reaction, and that's what I mean by the kindness movement. In the last few years of her life, she spent in declining health. She had heart problems, several surgeries, and then finally passed away in 1997. In a process that usually takes decades, maybe even centuries, she was very quickly beatified in 2003, and then canonized and made a saint by the Catholic Church just a couple of months ago on September 4th, 2016. The Missionaries of Charity still exist today and accept volunteers if you'd like to check that out at motherteresa.org, which is linked below also. And I would love to hear your thoughts in the comment section. Thank you so much for watching this video and learning with me on this journey. I'll see you guys next Wednesday for another 50 Shades of Great.